I want to welcome to the show Dr. Alistair Reese. Alistair, good evening, sir. Welcome again to the show.
Oh, tēnā kōrua. Yeah, good to be with you both. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for giving us a little bit of time tonight. Let's just jump straight into this, shall we? If I know what I'm doing, which I don't because my computer crashed. This is why it crashed last time when I tried to put up my screen. Hopefully it won't crash this time. I should have done this. Oh, there we go. It didn't crash. Let's just jump straight into it. Open letter from 400 plus Christian leaders on the treaty principle bill. The actual letter is here. Support Te Tiriti o Waitangi and oppose the proposed treaty's principle bill. The treaty principle bill may destabilise and harm Aotearoa New Zealand. Te Tiriti o Waitangi as a conventional relationship, covenantal, a covenant between parties. And we call on all members of Parliament to oppose the treaty's principle bill. I guess just firstly, Alistair, why did you sign it in particular?
I think the thing that upsets me the most is that I used this terminology before, Pat, when I described it. It's like people picking the scab off a scar and then exposing the scar, to infection. There's a scar in the land. There's what I call, or Māori use the term mamai. There's a deep pain, a deep hurt in the land that comes from our 175-year history where Te Tiriti has been dishonoured, forgotten about, trashed, all kinds of things. And since 1975, I'd say, 1985, the second reading of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill, it's like the country. And from a Pākehā point of view, we started on a journey to try and turn things around and perhaps give the honour to the treaty that it was due. And it's been a backwards, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But this one here is a 3-step back. So the reason being is contrary to David Seymour or ACT's proclamation that it's to shut down dialogue. It's not to shut down dialogue. It's just that's the wrong place for the type of dialogue that they wanted to have. There's a power imbalance that they're holding all the cards and they're actually deciding what the treaty says and what its repercussions will be, and then they will enact that. That's the power imbalance that is the fora ostensibly for the discussions that we want to have. So it's, for me, essentially this pain that's in the land that's been there for 175 years. It's in the process of being healed, and we see it all around us. Beautiful, expressions, tūranga waiwai, kingi tūheitia, other expressions of this re-emergence of a people and re-emergence of a hope, and then this sledgehammer to perhaps, address some little issues around the treaty that may need addressing, comes and just slams it. And sorry to mix my metaphors, all these metaphors all over the place, but so that's the main reason that I put my name to it, is that I thought this is really just going to exacerbate the pain, the mamai that's in the land already.
I was quite keen to talk to a couple of the people who have signed it. And, I went through the list, and there's probably 20 or 30 people in there that I know personally who have signed this letter. I was quite keen to talk to one or two of the people who are from, I guess, what looks from the outside to be a more conservative evangelical world, because it seems within this document and all these names, you have got a mix of sort of more progressive Christians, centrist Christians, and across to kind of more conservative Christians as well. Why do you think this is resonating with such a diverse range of people of the faith, rather than being taken up by sort of one slice, which might be seen as kind of the social justice part of the Christian church?
Pat, you and I have known each other for a few years now. We first encountered each other actually over this kaupapa, really, on Barrier. And if I don't know how many years ago that was, let's say it's 15
Too many.
years
many.
ago.
Yeah.
If this kaupapa had come up then, this list would have been much shorter.
Right.
What we've seen, I think, over the last 10, 15 years is a gradual buy-in by different aspects of the church. So if in late 1970s, early 1980s, when I think led probably by the Anglican Church in terms of their grappling with the treaty, they were, from a Pākehā point of view, they were the forerunners. And they were the leaders. Then we had also the Catholic Church came in, Methodist Church came in, but they led the way and were probably the sole representatives of a church demographic that was supportive of the treaty. The evangelical and particularly the Pentecostal church has been really slow, in my view, to pick this up. But it is, I think it's kind of a work of grace. It's a bit of a miracle territory, as you're rightly observing, that there's a wider group of churches that are now being, so I don't know if it's an adjustment to their theology or whatever, that they've actually allowed now the thinking to come in, hey, that, God could be in this. So, this is something that we can get involved with. I think there's some aspects that have been brought out, like this covenantal language around the treaty that's quite to the fore now. And I think that so the more conservative churches, it's given them perhaps an entranceway,
Right.
some language, some theological language that they can identify with and say, oh, okay, it's not extraneous, to who we are. That's actually, this is our language. This is theological language. So, and I'm hoping that, conscience at the end of the day, when people are faced by the extraordinary injustice that has been in the land and continues to be in the land, that once people start to pay it some deep and close attention, they get caught by this injustice and say, oh, we need to do something about this.
I did notice going through the list, though, that the pastor that Mr. Luxon was under in Auckland didn't sign on to this. Just a little thing I noticed as I was reading it. Hey, Chewie, you're kind of Captain No Religion here, sort of thing. What are your thoughts around the kind of church getting out and going, this needs to be sorted?
I might not be a person of faith, but I am a person of history. And certainly when I think of, say, the civil rights struggle in the US, there was obviously some very progressive religious leaders that put their weight behind that, and white church folk marching with black folk saying that this has to change, and a core group here in New Zealand of anti-apartheid protesters were a big part of that protest movement as well. And I think it can't be dismissed as easily as David Seymour thinks that it can be. I know. I think I have a lot of criticism for religious institutions and stuff like that. They don't always get it right. But I think this time they're very, very definitely in the right, and it comes from that point of view of caring for your community and pointing out something that is not fair and not just. They're right in this, and Seymour thinks that he can just brush it aside. Did he look at the list?
Yeah.
Like if somebody gave me a list of 400 names and said, "Hey, bro, you're doing this wrong," I'd probably give it some thought.
Talking about 400 names, it would be quite interesting, Alistair. I don't know if anyone's done this, but what the number of people under those leaders would be. Like if it's an Anglican vicar, how many people under him in the congregation? I wonder how many people these 440 represent, meaning, who are under them. Do we have any idea? Because it would be a lot.
Yeah. Excuse me, Pat. If we've been really, I was actually interviewed in a place today, and it was critiqued, actually, that the statement was made, these guys, don't actually represent their congregation. So, you know, so this we can't assume that because a leader has actually come forth and spoken this out, that they actually carry all the sentiments of their congregation. So, yeah, it's still, I think, quite a unique gathering of some pretty awesome people, actually, when you look through that list. I'm a bit biased, of course.
Yeah. No, there's some amazing names here. I'm also interested. I heard a few kind of, shall we say, contrary conversations today as to what we're talking about right now. And the idea of church and state got brought up. And the idea of, you know, to keep charitable status, you know, places aren't supposed to participate in politics. And places like, I think, Greenpeace and Family First have lost their charitable status. What do you think just about the concept of church leaders getting involved in politics? Is that what they're doing here? Is this the church getting involved in politics, or is this kind of social commentary slightly different from that?
Look, I think it's a false dichotomy. Pat, we're all political. How you know, it's polis. Go back to the Greek word. I mean, it's people. Politics is about people. You can't be a person without being political. Even in your silence, and this is my damnation of the church over the last however many years, was it silence. Actually, that silence, and we could extrapolate that out into other spheres as well. But mere silence is a political act. So it's an impossibility to be apolitical. And so I can understand what people are wanting to say in terms of this separation of church and state, and those are important discussions. But to say that it's like saying sport and sport and politics don't mix. So stay out of the anti-apartheid. Chewy, you were talking about that before. You know, for how many years did that hold people back from actually, you know, saying something about South Africa, just because we had that mantra saying, you know, sports can't get involved in that realm.
Yeah, which is nonsense. You speak to, well, not what you can now, but when you could speak to Nelson Mandela, he has stories about getting encouragement in while he was on Ellis Island from hearing what had happened on the field in Waikato. Like, you know, you can't have any more sport and politics. What I typically think when I hear that, Alistair, maybe it's the same in the, you know, religion or religion and politics, is when people say sports and politics should never mix. What they're typically saying is, I disagree with you, and this is my MO to trying to stop this conversation. You know, like you see it in America a lot, where, you know, LeBron James should never say anything. He should shut up and dribble, is the famous quote. But then if there's this kind of Christian, you know, NFL player who kneels and all this kind of stuff, then they get all exposure on Fox News. So it's really just furthering their narrative from going one way they shouldn't do it, the other way they should do it. I mean, I just think that's kind of what it comes down to, is people using it for their own agenda. Can we have a quick look at one of the things this is a reply from David Seymour on his social medias. One of the things I'd like to point out or ask you about most of all is the last paragraph he wrote. He talks about treaty principles bill should be dumped. I'm not a religious person. My parents baptized me. I've never regularly attended church. However, I do have enormous respect for the core Christian principle of Imago Dei. We are each made in the image of God. I like it because it automatically means we all have equal dignity. It is one of the foundations of liberal democracy, etc., etc., etc. That belief, however, is at odds with the recent interpretation of the Treaty of Waitangi. It would be unusual to say the least for 2,000 years of Christian faith to be overturned by one page of the treaty signed by a few hundred people in the country. So he's putting on his theologian hat there a little bit, I guess. The treaty principles bills reinforcing that all humans have equal rights is something that Christian leaders should be supporting if they want to play in politics. And this is the last paragraph. If you wonder why church attendance and reportedly Christianity is in decline in New Zealand today, today's display of church leaders abandoning a core, if not the core Christian belief to play politics might be a clue.
God.
You got any response to that, Alistair, just in general?
Yeah, gosh, there's so much to unpack in that.
Yeah.
How long have we got, Pat? But one of the things I think that is often trotted out is that this about the treaty is that it, if, for example, Maori are accorded a particular right, then that becomes unequal in terms of the liberal democratic perspective. And I think one of the things I want to have a billboard. Maybe you could back me in this billboard. And this is what I just want to say simply, Pat. Maori are special. Get over it.
Yeah.
The treaty was addressed to ngā rangatira me ngā hapu. It was addressed to them, right? And so within the context of what the treaty is all about, there is a specialness to tangata whenua. There is a specialness to tino rangatiratanga. So this specialness is something that has been enunciated, and we need to understand it and actually get over it. But if we go further than that, actually we all have all kinds of specialnesses in terms of the way that society is organized. I actually, as a tangata tiriti, have a specialness as well. So I get accorded some specialnesses that actually other people don't get accorded. So it's all about understanding the nature of the specialness that we occupy in some ways. So so that's one thing, is that somehow, for some reason, people find it very, very difficult. I'm talking about Pākehā particularly, if they perceive maybe that Māori might be getting some advantage that they are not getting, which is counterintuitive, given our history, given the all the data, etc., etc. So that's one thing. The idea of one person, one vote is another thing that is often trotted out as well. So our understanding of what the definition of democracy is hugely simplistic. And as I actually wrote this in an ODT article a little while ago, it's quite ironic that, for example, some of these minor parties are actually opposing anything that doesn't equate to a one person, one vote. I thought actually MMP was something that we introduced to have a better representation of people, and it's certainly not a one person, one vote system. We've actually gone beyond that because we understand that doesn't work. Finally, one more point.
Sure.
This whole aspect about democracy, there's such a thing called the tyranny of the majority. And that's the other thing that really frightens me about this bill, that, the weight of a majority can sometimes inflict a tyranny upon a minority. And so, again, that's a reason why I opposed this bill.
100%. We say that here often. Sometimes doing what the minority wants and need is the right thing to do. And if people don't believe that, then just start to look at things that happen within minority communities. So when we say the word minority, Alistair, I think people always go to race.
Right.
But like everyone's a minority. I own a dog. Dog owners are a minority. There are dog parks set up for us that other people don't use. It's like, if we think about it more like a people group, doesn't have to be a race, then it becomes, you can do the right thing for that small group of people. For dog owners, sure. For Māori, people go, don't know about that. Not quite so much. For dog owners, yeah, fine. For people with breast cancer, of course. For Māori, don't know about that. So we're going to be doing a bit more on this tonight, Alistair, about what just happened in Hawke's Bay, and Shane Reti deciding that just carte blanche Māori and Pacific children no longer get free GP visits because it's outside the purview of the coalition agreement. And that's the kind of thing. It's like, small group of people need help within the medical system. Prostate cancer people, sure. Māori, don't know about that. No, can't do that. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Have you had any blowback from this? And I ask you this because I haven't brought up who it is, but a friend of ours, I don't know if you saw this on Facebook today, did a radio interview today, and quite quickly afterwards got this sent to his inbox. You're a deluded satanic piece of shit. You are from the serpent seed. I'm not going to say who that came to, but someone we both know. Alistair, have you had any blowback about the signatory and the communications you've been having out there in public?
And from some quite surprising quarters, really, but nothing of that, nothing quite that matches that rhetoric. That's pretty sharp rhetoric, that one there. But as someone said to me today, well, you're going to put your head above the parapet, then just expect it. So, and it's a good exercise for me, really. There is some sort of admonition that we've probably heard, Pat, about loving our enemies, or turning other cheeks and all of those things. So it's a good spiritual exercise, really. So, and just in conclusion, as I said, from some quite surprising quarters, my name has now been included in some quite disparaging comments.
Welcome to the world of the misfits, Alistair. I've been here for a while. Come on in. The water's fine. Very, very, finally from me, Chewy, you're welcome to go off next if you want, but finally from me, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but our mate Bomber does a Tuesday night podcast. I just want to play this. We're not going to go into Bomber's show tonight. We sometimes review what he's been doing, but I want people to listen to how Bomber introduced this topic tonight. It's kind of amusing, but Shakespeare said, jest is oft-proved prophets. What we often say, many a truth be told in jest. Have a listen to how Bomber introduced this topic tonight.
And apparently, God doesn't like ACT. 440 Christian leaders have signed an open letter begging politicians to vote against and shun ACT's treaty principles referendum bill, while Chris Luxon is on every media channel explaining that MMP has made him vote for this radioactive toxic Trexit agenda. Damien, now I'm no theologian. I certainly am not. However, a few brief quotes from the Bible, if I will. Matthew 5:3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Mark 10:21, and Jesus, looking at them, loved them and said to him, you lack one thing. Go sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me. And Luke 6:20, and he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, blessed are you who are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Again, I'm no theologian, but the vibe seems to be Jesus is pretty keen on a capital gains tax and doesn't sound like he wants to create loopholes for property speculators. Why shouldn't God Almighty, the being of light, the father of all, why shouldn't he smite ACT?
That's a little introduction for you there. Of course, you left out the one, easier for a rich man to go through the eye of a needle than to get into heaven. Alistair, I know he was taking the piss a little bit or having a bit of fun with it, but, got any feedback on the actual content of what he said?
I love it, Pat. I love it. Yeah, I could get excited. No, he had me on the edge of my pew.
Hey, we've got a time to wrap up shortly. Chew, is there anything else you want to jump in here with? Any questions or comments before we wrap up?
I just want to loop back to this whole, basically, religion and church should stay out of politics. If you exist in this world, then you have a political opinion. And I've said this with less serious stuff, like people's perception that for some reason local city councillors don't have a political allegiance one way or the other, which is just laughable. And I think that goes through to parishioners and churchgoers and church leaders as well. Of course they do. Of course they do. You would have to have no brain and no eyes to not have an opinion. And whenever someone throws that out, if it's a musician or an actor or some other public figure, and in this case, a church leader, is that someone turns around and says, well, maybe you should just concentrate on running your church. I think you've won at that point, because that's the only argument that they've got. Sit down, shut up. Not a counter argument. It's just, I don't want to talk to you. So, yeah, keep doing it. Keep doing it. If you've got an opinion, share it. Because if you're silent, you whether you like it or not, you're on the side of the oppressor. So speak up.
What's that old adage? If there is a Nazi sitting, not that we're using this word Nazi blatantly, but it's the saying, there's a Nazi sitting at the table with 11 other people not saying anything, then there's 12 Nazis sitting at a table. Is that the saying? Something like that? Yep. Alistair, you can wrap us up. What would you like to leave us with?
I'd like to leave us with actually a further challenge, because I think we're starting to talk. It's a talk for another time, for another month, another year, Pat. But this sacred secular divide, I think we've referred to New Zealand as a secular country, and I think that's probably something of the roots of where perhaps the Liberal Democratic ACT Party, that's how they express themselves, thinking and assuming that the space is secular. But if let me say, there's two things here. If we're really inviting an Indigenous worldview to actually occupy a seat at the table, then secularity sort of, it goes out the window. So we actually have to make room in our public spaces to find a place that we can begin to talk about the sacred spaces as well. I'll finish on one other thing, is that I don't know if I mentioned it last time I was with you, but two kaumātua from Tauranga 2 years ago rang me up and said, we've got a petition, we want you to support us in it. And I said, of course, well, what's a petition? And they said, we want the fourth article, the oral article of the treaty, to be honoured by the Crown. And so that we got a petition going. Right. They've both died in the last 2 years, but that petition, I'm going to stand before the Select Committee on the 22nd of October to argue for an oral article has as much credibility as a written article, and that leads us into that whole area of where sacred and secular sits within our society. I know it's complicated, but it's a conversation that we need to have, because there's a lot of hypocrisy going on around the nation right now in terms of the karakia, non-karakia. We just need to come out and say, hey, have we got a space for this or have we not?
Yeah, very cool. I tell you what, I want to leave us with one thing. I'm watching the series 1883 at the moment, Alistair, really enjoying it. And there is a scene that I saw just in tonight's episode where I guess white Americans, whatever you'd call them, pilgrims, cowboys, are traveling across the plains, and they're coming up to Native American lands, indigenous lands. And they've got quite a good relationship. They're kind of trading with them and stuff. And one of the guys goes up to the Native American and he says, "What's that?" And he's pointing to a conquistador helmet, like a metal helmet that the Spanish, and he goes, "What's that?" And I'll read you the quote because it's here. So the guy's name is James. He says, "What that?" And the Native American says, "It's from the Spanish. They tried to take our land too." James quickly replied, "I ain't taking nothing. I'm just passing through." Even though the man knows James is yet to wrong his people, so he's an ally, you could say. He says to this is what the Native American says: "Our land cannot be taken. White man thinks he took it. White man is like the wolf. He kills everything until only the wolves are left. And then the wolves kill each other. And then there's nothing. And our land is free again." And James listens, responds, and goes, "That sounds about right." Just watching it tonight, it just made me think these stories from around the world, and how when you think about the indigenous stories from around the world, how they just seem to be 5% different, but the themes behind them seem so the same. So
can I just close with one more quote, Pat?
Sure.
The late Moana Jackson, sitting with his moko, with his grandson, and he was talking to him about the treaty, and he said, "The treaty is like a mountain. It will never move."
Very good. It's Dr. Alistair Reese. Hey, Alistair, thanks so much for joining us tonight, mate. The door's always open. Anytime you want to come on, you just let us know and we'll chuck you in.
Ngā mihi.
Speak to you again soon. Thanks, Alistair.